Welcome back. We're going to dive into segment four to kind of wind up and finish up chapter one. And in the text, they have a diagram that talks about leader effectiveness. And the diagram at the top, it's got leader, and then in the middle, it's got follower, and then down at the bottom, it's got context. And all three of these mesh or merge together to to generate leader effectiveness or leadership skills and effectiveness. So it's a nice little graph, and I think it's one that you may want to kind of keep in your back pocket that you can refer to, from time to time, because you can have the best leaders from a personal characteristics, behaviors sitting at the top, but if you don't have followers that are willing to follow and have the respect of that leader and work in an environment that makes leadership conducive and makes leadership important and allows the leader and the followers to work together as a team to improve effectiveness and production or profitability, it makes leadership extremely difficult for any individual. And that's why I made the comment in the last segment that if you don't like the place where you work now and you're going to jump to a new organization, kind of think about, and you can ferret this out in the interview process. Kind of think about what you think the leadership requirements or leader or culture is going to be. Is it going to be conducive to your leadership style? Or if it's not, do you think that you will be able to change your leadership style, to tweak your leadership style in such a way that you're going to be successful in that organization? The book talks about, and it's an old saying, it always takes two to tango, and that's where they're talking about leaders and followers working together, because it does take two to tango. And it especially as a leader, you have to have a group of followers that especially if you're going to make changes to processes and procedures, you have to have a group of followers that buy into your rationale for making the changes, that are going to support you and help you move those changes forward. Kind of goes back to the old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And that's where a lot of leaders end up, is they've got some great ideas and they know what needs to occur to get to affect change. It's just they can't get the followers to buy in on it. And some of it could be the rationale in which they present the new strategy, or some of it could be just the organizational culture, or some of it could be just the expectations of the followers. So that's why that graph or that little diagram that they've got in the text, I think it's one that you want to keep in your back pocket. And they also talk about, normal versus crisis, and that is extremely important to understand, especially in the world today. Is, are you going to be managing or trying to lead teams in kind of a normal situation, or are you going to lead them in a crisis situation? If you in working, and I worked for Health Net for several years, and they were constantly bidding on, at least the group I worked with, it was more on the government side. So we were constantly bidding on government contracts, and extremely stressful, but very it was a team that had been together a long time, and they understood it was kind of this crisis management of trying to, to meet deadlines and to make sure that you had the best proposal available for the government. So it, again, some individuals, some leaders work well under normal circumstances, but they can't handle the crisis, and vice versa. I've seen leaders in the past that they needed crisis and they needed turmoil and they needed to be in an environment that is, constantly in flux and constantly changing to be effective leaders. So develop your leadership style and decide, as a leader, do you want to manage a team more of in a normal process, or do you like do you like managing in a crisis situation, managing where change is expected and change is constant? And they went through like 5 or 6 kind of attributes that, leaders can have in the text. And, they talked about consider the leader, follower context. And that's kind of what we've been going through here. And, and then they also talk about successful leaders lead by example. I've always taken the approach that I wouldn't ask my team to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And I think that a lot of your successful leaders take that same approach. Don't ask your team to do something that if you wouldn't do it yourself. And there was in 2011, Blue Cross Blue Shield, we went through a strike, and it was the union staff, they were more on the operational side of the house, but as they walked out the door, all that was left was the exempt team. And not only myself, but a lot of the managers and a lot of the leadership in that health plan found ourselves during the strike and more than happy to working nights and weekends and processing claims and delivering mail and doing jobs that you wouldn't thought about doing. But at the same time, we were leading by example. Hey, we were willing to do it. And what you found is you had a lot of volunteers. Once they saw leadership was willing to step forward and take on those responsibilities, you had a lot of volunteers that actually stepped forward and were willing to come in and work, nights and weekends to ensure that, we were getting the job done and taking care of the health plan customers. And so it was extremely rewarding to see that. But the reason we ended up in that situation was because the leaders were willing to step forward and help with the day-to-day operational activities. It says, the third one talks about lead by walking around. I found that over the years to be extremely useful. Then I tried to, depending on, which team I was managing and, which organization I was in, but I tried to at least once in the morning and once in the afternoon kind of circle through where the teams were, ask them questions about, what they were doing. Sometimes they like to, some team members like to, talk about, personal issues. Others like to stay focused on, here's the job. I need some help doing this, that, and the other. And, walking through, not sitting in your office. And at Health Net especially, the CEO was constantly on the floor, touching base with people, walking around. When they'd have like Halloween parties, they would be right out there in the middle of it. And, there would be occasions where they would bring food in for the company and, he'd be right out there serving, all of the employees, just like, it was not that being that he really enjoyed, getting right in the middle of the individuals that were on his team and making Health Net successful. And then you got the flip side of that. And I've worked in organizations where, the leaders just sat in their office and you never saw them. So, they didn't want to come out. They didn't want to, to see. And when they did, come out for whatever reason, occasionally they would come out and, the teams looked at them and say, man, what's gone wrong? Said, why are they out here today? So, lead by walking around. I think it is a great opportunity for a leader, if at all possible. Now, with the COVID, with the impact of COVID and the number of people working remotely, working from home, having to do things by Zoom or Teams, depending on, what kind of visual software product you're using, but it makes it extremely difficult to get that interpersonal reaction with remote teams that you could get when everybody was on site and you could walk around and you could talk to people And you could show the team that you were showing your teams that you cared about what they were doing, cared about the issues they were facing, that you cared about, you were trying to help provide resources to make everybody successful. And, number 4, they talk about give recognition. Every company I've worked for, I've been fortunate that there was a line item on the budget that talked about associate recognition. And there were X number of dollars allocated on a quarterly basis. And, we would, bring food in Buffalo. I think it was on Tuesdays. There was a bagel outfit in Buffalo that on Tuesdays they would deliver bagels. That you'd get 13 bagels for the price of a dozen, and they'd throw in some cream cheese, and you'd bring bagels in. You'd bagels and coffee. You'd bring it in. Sometimes you'd take them out to dinner. Sometimes you would cater, and it really depends on the type of staff you had, because in Buffalo, the union staff, when it came to recognition, they had a different outlook on recognition than the exempt staff had. So the exempt staff were more focused on bonuses and kind of pats on the back, than where the union staff was more focused on they like to be fed on a monthly basis. So we would have, once a month we'd cater in lunch, or they liked raffles and drawings and, gift cards and, little tchotchke kind of things. So, your recognition and what your team likes, so is it just a pat on the back? Is it, hey, great job? Is it, squeezing a little more out of the bonus? I mean, different things drive, from a recognition standpoint, different things drive different people. And it's a matter for you as the leader to figure out what it is that drives those leaderships or drives your teams. And from a leader's perspective, you want to be able to provide that type of recognition. It talks about think and act, paradoxically. And if you think about that, it kind of goes back to, if you think about the diagram that I talked about earlier, where you got the micromanager on one tail, you got the empowerment over here on the other. How are you willing to be a little more autonomous and give people more flexibility? I think flexibility and empowerment is a fantastic way to manage people. However, if you go that route, I think it's important that everybody understands that if you want to be empowered and you want to have some autonomy, you've got to be willing to accept responsibility. Health Net, United, 2 health plans, again, that I've worked for in the past, they were more than willing to take risk, to allow you some autonomy, to allow you to take risk, especially if they thought it was going to drive customer satisfaction or it was going to drive return on investment. But if you take risk and you implemented a strategy that didn't hit the goals that you thought it would, they expect you to take responsibility for that. And that's always an approach that I like. I certainly don't have a problem with taking responsibility. If you take responsibility, it makes you think through your strategies a little more as a leader. But if I like autonomous, I like empowerment, I like to be able to take and develop strategies and to move them forward. And I think a lot of the teams that I've managed in the past are that way too. They like the autonomy, they like to be empowered. And, everything was fine as long as they were willing to accept responsibility. And then the last one, they talk about be here now. And I think it's important for undivided attention. And I think what they give you in the text is they're talking about a cell phone. So I had, again, managers in Buffalo, they had, from a micromanager to an empowerment, and, I'd get the managers together on a weekly basis and we'd talk about what we needed to do, talk about, where we thought the goals were headed, where we thought we needed to work from a team perspective to get from point A to point B. And I had one manager that, was constantly, just drove me nuts, was constantly either on the laptop, on the company cell phone, on the personal cell phone, constantly working all of these electronic devices. And it drove you nuts. So, and I think back on it, and it's like, it's a wonder it hadn't actually pushed me over the edge, because the way that this individual acted. So, but when people came to my office to talk to me about something, I always took and I put my office phone on mute. I put my cell phone on the desk. I told them to, put their cell phone in their pocket, shut down the laptop unless they needed to tell me something, they needed to show me something. And that way it forced not only them, but it forced me to give them, and it was an exchange of undivided attention. We were able to focus on the issues at hand. There were no distractions, close the door, phones off, computers shut down, unless, again, we had some diagram or some spreadsheet that we're working on. But it forces everybody undivided attention. And it's just mindfulness of time. To me, it's just proper etiquette to be focused on the here and now, making sure that everybody is attentive, and it's just an efficient use of time. And with that, it winds up chapter 1. It won't be too much longer. We'll jump into chapter 2. And until then, I'll talk to everybody later. Thank you.